6 Psychological Anchors for Stability. There is a particular kind of exhaustion that has nothing to do with sleep. You wake up after 8 hours and you still feel it, this low, ambient hum of unease that you cannot quite name and cannot quite shake. You go through your day, you do the things, you say the right words to the right people, and somewhere underneath all of it, something feels quietly unmoored, like you're managing the surface of your life while something deeper keeps shifting. Most people assume this feeling means something is wrong with them, that they lack discipline or willpower, or the kind of inner calm they see in other people, the ones who seem to move through chaos without being swallowed by it. And so they read the articles, try the habits, download the apps, and still nothing quite holds. The feeling returns. The ground keeps moving. What almost no one talks about is why. Not in a way that actually lands. Because what is really happening in those moments, the anxious spiraling, the emotional flooding, the sense of being at the mercy of your own inner weather, is not a character flaw. It is the absence of something specific, something the nervous system has been quietly searching for, often since childhood. And that something has a name. Psychologists call them anchors. Not metaphorical anchors, structural ones, points of internal and external reference that signal to the brain, you are safe, you are located, you are real. This is what stability is actually built from, not from having a perfect life or a clear mind or the right circumstances. From 6 specific psychological anchors that most people never consciously develop because no one ever explained that they needed to. The first anchor is physical regularity. This sounds almost insultingly simple, but the neuroscience behind it is significant. The brain's threat detection system, the amygdala, is acutely sensitive to unpredictability. Research from the field of allostasis, the study of how the brain maintains internal balance, shows that the body uses consistent patterns, sleep times, meal times, movement, as a baseline signal of safety. When those rhythms are absent, the nervous system cannot fully downregulate. It stays in a quiet state of alert, not panic, just vigilance. And sustained vigilance, even low level, is profoundly draining. Regularity is not a productivity strategy. It is a nervous system message that says the world is predictable enough. You can rest. The second anchor is a single non-negotiable practice, not a routine. One thing, something that exists regardless of how good or bad the day is, something that is entirely yours. Research on what psychologists call self-defining activities suggests that consistent engagement with a chosen behavior across time builds what is called narrative identity, a felt sense that you are the same person yesterday as today. People who have this anchor tend to recover from disruption faster, not because the practice is magical, but because it functions as proof of continuity. When everything else shifts, this one thing remains. The third anchor is physical safety in the body. The nervous system does not distinguish between emotional threat and physical threat in the way we assume it does. Decades of somatic research, particularly the work coming out of trauma studies and polyvagal theory, have established that the body holds state. Tension in the jaw, shallow breathing, a chronically braced posture. These are not just symptoms of stress, they feed it. Learning to locate safety in physical sensation, even briefly, even imperfectly, interrupts the feedback loop. A grounded body tells the brain there is no emergency. The brain, over time, begins to believe it. The fourth anchor is relational constancy. Not connection, constancy. There is a difference. Connection is what you feel in a good conversation. Constancy is the quiet certainty that someone exists who knows you and remains. Attachment research, going back to Bowlby and forward through modern neuroscience, consistently shows that the brain's capacity to regulate emotion is not a solo act. It is, in significant part, a co-regulatory one. We are wired to use one another as nervous system resources. When that resource is reliably available, even one person, even imperfectly, it changes what the brain is able to tolerate alone. You do not need many people. You need the right constancy. The fifth anchor is a coherent personal narrative. This one is subtle and it matters more than most people realize. The brain is a meaning-making organ. It does not simply record experience, it organizes it into a story. Research by James Pennebaker and others on expressive writing and by Dan McAdams on life narrative shows that people who can construct a coherent story about their own life, including the difficult parts, demonstrate significantly greater psychological resilience. Not because the story is positive, because it is integrated. The parts connect. There is a through line. When experience remains fragmented, unexamined, unnamed, the nervous system cannot file it. It stays active, unresolved, looking for completion. Coherence is not denial. It is the difference between carrying something and being haunted by it. The sixth anchor is a relationship with the present moment that is neither avoidant nor obsessive. This one is perhaps the most nuanced one. Presence, in the clinical sense, does not mean joy or peace. It means contact with what is actually happening, rather than with the projected version of it. Studies on rumination and worry consistently show that psychological suffering is elevated not by difficult circumstances themselves, but by the mind's movement away from them into past regret or future catastrophizing. The present, however uncomfortable, is finite and survivable. The nervous system can work with what is real. It struggles with what is imagined. Here's the thing that most people do not expect to hear about any of this. These anchors are not things you acquire once and keep. They are things you return to, repeatedly, imperfectly, across an entire life. Stability is not a state you achieve. It is a practice of returning. And every time you return, from the spiral, from the drift, from the numbness, the path back becomes slightly more worn, slightly more familiar to find in the dark. This is not about becoming someone who no longer gets knocked off balance. It is about becoming someone who has learned where the ground is, who knows what they feel like when they are actually themselves, who recognizes the drift early enough to do something about it. Some people discover these anchors naturally, through a childhood that modeled them, or a life that accidentally delivered them. Others come to them late, quietly, through experience and reflection. Neither path is better. Both lead to the same place, a person who can be with their own life without being at war with it. If you recognized something in here, not because it told you something new, but because it named something you've always quietly known, that recognition is worth staying with. There is something adjacent to this, something about the way certain kinds of people relate to their own emotional life that goes even deeper. And if this felt like a beginning, that might be worth following.